through. Well, Doug Herbert joins me on the set now for more. Doug, this is the third and final diplomatic meeting in a week, little or no progress. Was this outcome to be expected?
It was almost preordained because both sides, but I'll say especially Russia, came with a script already written and a sort of immutable script. Vladimir Putin has predicated all of these talks, this week of talks, on his notion that he needs to shore up what he considers his sphere of influence. It's the backyard. Russia's backyard are all of those former Soviet-era states, which have, in most cases, enjoyed independence for the past 3 decades. What Vladimir Putin coming to this table and his negotiators working for him have done is essentially they're trying to turn back the geopolitical clock to sort of a Cold War, end of the Cold War world order, the 90s, really. And it's a gravity-defying geopolitical act in many respects. What NATO has basically done in the U.S. is they have refused to sort of buy into what they see as Putin's paranoid vision of the world, a vision in which wherever Putin looks, he sees plots to subvert Russian power. Instead, they have refused to accede to the core demands of Russia coming into these talks at the beginning of this week. That Ukraine and Georgia, 2 former Soviet republics, would never be allowed, ever, to join NATO. NATO has an open-door policy. It is stuck to it. And also, NATO refusing to allow Russia to dictate, that is, to serve ultimatums on NATO allies, on their ability to be able to choose where they are going to position their forces. These have been red lines for NATO. So you had an ideological clash, a radically, diametrically opposed world visions of Europe's security architecture coming into these talks. So when I say preordained, there was very little wriggle room on either side. And the West would say very little good faith on Russia's side because Russia knew where it stood and knew coming in that it was not going to back down on any of these core demands.
So given that, what's next? More talks or more sanctions ahead?
Well, look, if there's a silver lining to this, both sides are acknowledging that talking is better than not talking. And the very fact you've had talks, you can make the argument, okay, they're around a table, right? But that said, there has been no progress. And what comes next? Well, look, yesterday in the U.S., we saw Democratic senators pass a bill that would be very, very tough, imposing sanctions against Russian government and military officials right up to and including Vladimir Putin. Those would also perhaps offering Ukraine more security assistance, perhaps financial measures which would cut Russia out of the SWIFT international banking system, and also finally looking at the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which is set to go operational perhaps, and would carry natural gas from Russia to Germany, bypassing Ukraine. Very controversial, but they would look at all appropriate and available measures if this bill were to pass in the U.S., at perhaps not allowing that to happen. So Russia says basically imposing those types of sanctions would be tantamount to severing relations with Russia. So you could see very harsh words on each side. At least they're talking, where do we go from here? Well, it's not hopeful right now, but the fact they sat around a table, I guess, let's try to end on an optimistic note, could be worse.
All right, Doug, thanks so much for that. Now, 2,000 Russian-led